بحضور الدائم مع الله عز وجل ووصف حسن الأدب على بساط الذلة والانكسار والاضطرار والافتقار تحقيقا للعبودية ووفاء بحق الربوبية إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Inshallah, continuing with our lessons on some of the rules of fasting as well as the spiritual dimensions on fasting. The author says in chapter 3, it is sunnah to hasten in breaking one's fast, and there is more blessings in breaking one's fast with dates, because the Prophet ﷺ said, when any of you breaks their fast, then let them break their fast with dates, for it is a blessing. And if one does not find dates, then they should drink water, for it is purifying. So the sunnah is to hasten in breaking one's fast. And there are other traditions in which the Prophet ﷺ said, as long as the ummah continues to hasten to break their fast, then there is khair in the ummah. And this is an indication and a warning against delaying to break one's fast. There is a certain group or a certain sect of people who fast and they delay breaking their fast until the stars appear, the earlier time of Isha, which is against the Sunnah. So the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging us to break our fast at the first onset of sunset. Generally, out of precaution, when a person looks at their calendar or they look at the application on their phone, they will have the Maghrib time. In Ramadan, it is maybe advisable to wait at least 1 or 2 minutes or at least 3 minutes later than that particular time, unless you're following an authority, an ulama body in the country that gives a specific time, and then they have taken these 2 or 3 minutes into account. Generally, when a mu'adhin who is breaking his fast, he would break his fast first, and then he would give the adhan. So generally, when we hear the adhan, this is generally speaking, a person needs to know their masjid and what the practice is. The practice should be that the mu'adhin first breaks his fast with dates, sip of water, or just merely a sip of water, and then he gives the adhan, and then the people, when they hear the adhan, should break their fast. This is the sunnah, to break the fast when one hears the adhan, not when one looks at the time on their app or when one hears the adhan on their phone application. The sunnah is to hear the adhan at the local masjid, and it's important that the mu'adhineen as well know the rules of fasting and the rules of giving adhan at the time of sunset. Once I was in Hudaydah, and I was in a hotel, and from the hotel you can see the sea and the sun setting on the horizon, and it's very clear. You can see the entire disk of the sun and going down. And it happened to be a Monday and a Thursday, a normal day of the week. And at the time of Maghrib, the mu'adhin started giving the adhan, but there was still a little bit of sun left. When you look at the time on the calendar, it says that this is the time for sunset, but that particular area, perhaps an incline, a decline, it's in a lower hill, and one needs to know, even these applications that are built, who builds them? Do they take into account the different portions on the earth which are higher, which are lower? If you go to Dubai and you break your fast and you're on the ground, go up to the top of one of those buildings and then you'll still see the sun at the end. The question came into the iftar department. The guy says, I work on the top floor, one of these skyscrapers in Dubai. At the bottom, they're giving adhan. If I'm still at the top, I can see the sun. And so it's very important that a person understands the rules. A person is not supposed to break their fast unless the location that you are in, the entire disk of the sun has set in that location that you are in. If there is a mountainous region and the mountains are relatively close, then those mountains don't serve as a horizon. But if those mountains are on the horizon, they're at a far distance, then by the sun setting behind those mountains, those could serve as the sun setting. As one can see, this requires specialization in understanding the movements of the sun and the moon, and the science of astronomy of Ilm al-Falak was a prized science in the Islamic history. Until today, it is still taught in the original Arabic language in certain institutions. So one needs to know the rules of the sun and the moon, the movement of the stars, in order to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If one has an ulama body or authority, as we mentioned earlier, that one trusts, then one can follow what they say, because it is impossible for every person to know these rules. Now, then the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging one to break their fast with dates. And again, this is the sunnah. And when we speak about the sunnah, we speak about what is the best thing for a person in all dimensions. From a physical dimension, an emotional dimension, a spiritual dimension. The Prophet ﷺ, when he did things, he didn't just do it because that was his preference. When I mean his preference, meaning it just was being done for the sake of doing it. He knew that there was no better way to do this particular action than that particular way which he chose. So the way the Prophet ﷺ did anything, the way he slept, the way he ate, the way he walked, the way he talked, right? There is an inherent nur and illumination in this, that if a person does this, they align their soul to the soul of the Prophet ﷺ in that particular action. They gain a light into their heart from the Prophet ﷺ, and they become illuminated if their intention is to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And then one will come to science, and then they will find that there is nothing better for a person who is fasting than to break their fast with dates. And then the Prophet ﷺ said in other narrations, if one does not have dates and a sip of water, if one does not have a sip of water, then anything sweet. Science will tell us that obviously when you are fasting, the blood sugar levels have dropped. And the best thing to break your fast with is something sweet, to push up your glucose levels. Natural sweet, not unnatural, processed sweets. So dates have an inherent blessing. And science will tell us all of the blessings that dates have. The Prophet ﷺ would say that the house, the meaning of the narration, that the house in which there is dates, then there is still goodness in that house. Or the house in which there is dates, there is no poverty in that house. Because dates serve as an entire meal. A person, if they only had to eat dates and nothing else, they could survive. And they wouldn't have any lack in any of their nutrition. In Hadramaut, in Yemen, up to very, very recently, the people survived on dates. And they could live on dates and not have anything else. They would have dates, and if they had a cow, they don't have cows in Hadramaut, they had a camel or sheep or goats, they would survive on dates and that camel, goat, and obviously the coffee. They like drinking coffee. Dates have an immense benefit to the body and an immense benefit in strength. There's a story of a person from Hadramaut who went to Egypt, and he was walking in the souk, and he found a person going around to the coin minters, people that were selling. So they would sell gold coins, or they would sell a certain type of coin, and the degree of gold would differ because it wouldn't be pure gold. They would mix it with other metals, and that would be used for buying and selling. And there was sometimes ghish or sometimes deception, in which if you bent the coin or you tried to break the coin, it would break, and that would be a sign that it is a fake coin, or it would bend tremendously and you knew it was a fake coin. So this person was going around with the coins, going to all of these people, breaking them and telling them, you are deceiving the people. But the coins were 100%, they were original coins, but he had an immense amount of strength. And with his bare hands, he was able to do this. And this person from Hadramaut saw this, and he knew this person was trying to trick the people. So he went and he told, give me the coins from your pocket. If you claim that these coins are, and he takes the coin and he says, your coins are fake. So this person automatically knew that he had extraordinary strength. So he took him one side, he told him, what's your secret? So he told him, if you tell me your secret, I'll tell you my secret. And they knew what they were referring to. What they were referring to was a special food or a type of food they would eat which would give this person extraordinary strength. And so he says, you tell me first. And this person, he mentions, he says, there's a type of food you eat, and there is gold shavings. You shave off the gold from pure gold shavings, you mix it with that food, and you eat that, and you get that strength. He said, as for me, I'm from Hadramaut, we don't have anything to eat besides dates. But we eat dates as a meal. And don't drink anything after that until the dates have completely digested in our system. So at least you eat dates as a meal as much as you need to feel full, and then you don't drink anything afterwards, and you don't mix any food with it afterwards for at least an hour to 2 hours. Generally when you eat dates, what happens? You get thirsty. It's natural to get thirsty when you eat anything. But if you give the body the ability and the opportunity to only suffice on those dates, it gives this body this amazing amount of strength. And so dates have immense blessings and many, many blessings which science will still discover later. Not just the dates, but the date tree. The Prophet ﷺ described the date tree as resembling the believer. He once asked the Sahaba, and they were elderly Sahaba, and there was the son of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu there, Ibn Umar al-Tanani. And the Prophet ﷺ asked, there is a particular tree which resembles the believer. Which tree is it? And the Sahaba were all silent. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, it is the date palm. Right? And there's many books written about the resemblance and how the benefits of the date palm, how it's humbling with its leaves down, the benefit that comes from it. So when Sayyidina Umar anhu went back to the house, he told his father Umar anhu, that when the Prophet ﷺ asked, in my mind, I thought it's the date palm, but I didn't say. Sayyidina Umar says, why didn't you say? He says, I saw all the other Sahaba. He says, had you said that, there would have been nothing that made me prouder than if you gave the right answer at the request of the Prophet ﷺ. So dates have an immense benefit, and obviously we know that there are many, many different types of dates. There's over thousands of different types of dates, each have different benefits. The Prophet ﷺ himself marketed the ajwa, right, by speaking about the benefits that the ajwa has. Dates are so beneficial that they don't only have a physical effect, they transcend into the spiritual domain. The Prophet ﷺ said, a person who eats 7 ajwa dates in the morning will not be afflicted by what? By sihr. Sihr is part of the spiritual domain, the non-physical domain. And so we know that there can be an interlinking between the physical and the non-physical and the spiritual just by eating these dates. Again, this is where science ought to pay attention, is what is the secret in a person eating 7 dates, and what is the particular distinguishing feature about 7 dates in which it saves a person from being affected by sihr. And if a person knows how the people of sihr operate and how they work, it's just incantation. Sometimes it has to do with calling on, the jinn getting hair of the person or whatever it is. In fact, what's actually also very dangerous in today's times that people don't realize is with your picture. If you have your picture of your wife, your children, your daughters, that, it's very easy for people then to do sihr. Our women especially need to be wary of this, especially those who post pictures of themselves on social media. And if one is and one needs to be on social media for any reason, one should read the du'as for protection. Just as there are du'as for eating and drinking and everything else, there should be du'as for using social media and appearing on social media. Meaning this didn't exist at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so there was no du'as that come in the sunnah. But if we know that the Prophet ﷺ had a du'a for every occasion, then there should be a du'a for picking up your phone, there should be a du'a for opening WhatsApp, there should be a du'a for appearing on YouTube. Do we even realize this? Or we just go into YouTube and we just use these applications, we just send the message out, not realizing that everything has its implications. Right? There could be someone who has an evil eye, there could be someone who has hasad, there could be someone who has jealousy, over and above all the good du'as and the good gazes and the good perceptions that people might have. Now, supplications at the time of iftar, breaking the fast, are recommended as the fasting person's supplications at the time of iftar are not rejected. A Muslim should also be keen to provide provisions for a fasting person to break their fast with, as the rewards for this are great indeed. We spoke about this before, how a person should give dates to people, right? Share food. It's a very, very beautiful custom in the Muslim communities in the Ramadan, where they share food. Food is given to the neighbors. And one doesn't worry about whether the neighbor is going to eat this food and not eat my food, and etc. etc. One should be aware when it comes to sugar, okay, because sugar is poison, right? And all the sweet meats and whatever, one should try and give healthy food to their neighbors, right? One should try, and just as in the things that you would eat, you give to others to eat as well. When it comes to dua at the time of iftar, this is a very, very, very important part of one's spirituality. This time of iftar, when the sun is going down, now a person at the end of the day, you're almost at your last. If you're someone that does physical work, some people, and we should all thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we do not have work which drains our energy. There are many people in the world who have to fast in Ramadan and they still have to work such work that requires physical strain, working in the sun, etc. And for whatever reason, they can't get off in that. We will have sportsmen that will play in Ramadan, mashallah. What's interesting though is that science says that the strength and stamina of a fasting person is more than a non-fasting person. Because there is a spiritual strength when a person fasts, which doesn't exist if a person is not fasting. This has actually been proven by non-Muslim scientists. There's a German scientist that was experimenting with fasting, and he experimented with fasting to cure a host of diseases. Fasting, as we heard in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in the days before, the Prophet ﷺ said, fast or take yourself to fasting because there is nothing more beneficial than fasting. If a person wants to cure the body of each and every single type of disease, right? Any type of disease, and any means any. All a person needs to do is fast and make sure that at the time of iftar, they don't put into their body anything that is unhealthy. Now in Canada, there is an institute called the North Institute, also non-Muslims. They are experimenting with what is known as water fasting, keeping food out of the body completely and only drinking water. And they are finding that when the body has no food in it, it actually has an ability and an opportunity to cure itself. The body has a natural healing mechanism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in it. Medicine and pharmaceuticals, and speaking about pharmaceuticals, someone from some pharmaceutical company just walked in as well. Right? Pharmaceuticals in medicine, what do? They cover the symptoms, but the body has a natural healing process, and they have a natural department as well to assist the body in its natural process to cure. Just as if a person cuts themselves, what causes the blood clot? The body's natural healing process. And so if the body is left alone and we do not put any food in the stomach, we give the brain time, we give the body time, it's going to start going into recovery mode. It starts ridding itself of all these toxins. Why does a person get a headache when they fast if you're a drinker of coffee? It's because you're going into detox. The first 2 or 3 days of fasting is always the most difficult because your body is now going into detox mode, right? The chemical balance is changing in the body as well. The body is not getting that sugar or that caffeine or whatever, but it's purifying the body of these things. So one would feel nauseous, one might get a headache, etc. But after 3-4 days, it's smooth sailing, right? You don't feel the fast anymore. The body gets used to it. And health experts even say that the worst thing for the body is what? Is eating on a full stomach. Is when you have food in your stomach, you eat something. And snacking throughout the day is the worst thing for a person's health. Because as long as you put something in your stomach, what happens? The body has to be busy with digestion. It's not getting a time to actually heal itself. And this ought to be the benefit of fasting, that you go through this entire period of at least 12, and even modern science now says 12 to 16 hours. Even when they talk of intermittent fasting, some of the studies say 12 to 16 hours should be the break between the time that you don't eat any food, just to give the body that break. This German scientist, there was a Muslim journalist that actually came to interview him, and he actually reprimanded him. He said, you Muslims don't realize the benefit of fasting, and you do your bodies more harm in Ramadan than benefit. And you're surprised. He said, why? He said, the secret of fasting is not to stay away from the food during the day, it's to stay away from the food at night when you're allowed to eat. And what you eat at night in Ramadan, your body is completely nourishing itself on it 100%. Meaning, if you eat something sweet or sugary or unhealthy in Ramadan, it is worse for you than if you eat it out of Ramadan. Because in Ramadan, your body is completely taking all this benefit, or its body's benefit is taken completely from this food. Therefore, you'll find people after Ramadan as well, they're sometimes in a worse state than they were before because they weren't careful about the sunnah of eating in Ramadan. And one of the greatest sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was what? Was with regards to eating. Sayyidina Aisha anha says that the first bid'ah, the first innovation after the death of the Prophet ﷺ was eating extra food. right? Eating more than 2 meals or more than 2 types of food on one meal. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to eat 2 times a day. They would eat in the morning and the evening. They wouldn't have 3 meals a day. And their morning meal, what we regard as morning, was at the time of lunch. What we regard as lunch and something in the evening. From the time of sleeping right up until the next day lunch, generally there wasn't anything that was eaten except maybe drinking water. And this now is actually proven to be the most healthy thing for the body. So when a person at night, they're allowed to eat, pay attention to your body and pay attention to even what your body tells you and what Allah tells you in your mind. Generally, when you're eating and iftar time comes, there's a voice that says, "Khalas, you don't need to eat more." But just because the food tastes nice, and this is a great mujahada. If a person makes an intention to go against their nafs for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even to the extent, right? And Imam Sha'rani speaks about this, that when you stay away from food that your body is craving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will cry, or the nafs will make you cry for being deprived from that food. And you won't know the extent to which our bodies are attached to food and even the tastes of food until you deprive it of it. And then you realize, what are we actually? You are a servant of what? Are we a servant of Allah? Or are we servants of our stomachs? Habib Umar many times would say a person will spoil their hal and their state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of a raisin or because of a cup of tea. You don't get the cup of tea, what happens to your character? Right? Sugar is not right in the tea, what happens to our characters? We don't get what we used. It means we are servants of our stomachs. And Ramadan ought to teach us this. Right? One of the biggest lessons a person can do for themselves, or benefits a person can do for themselves in Ramadan, is not to eat until you call yourself to account. Do I really need to eat this? Is it going to benefit me, give me strength for worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or am I only eating it because it tastes nice, or it looks nice, or I'm used to eating it? If one can do this type of mujahada, it's better than many different types of ibadah, worship, dhikr, recitation of Quran, etc., etc., etc. Right? Because the ibadah of mana, the ibadah of restraining oneself, is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the ibadah of doing. Everyone does, but only pious people restrain themselves. Now, and then finally, if the time of iftar is a time for acceptance of supplications of du'as, we ought not to be busy until the time of adhan with preparation. If the time for preparation of food is taking our time in Ramadan, preventing us from spending time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we're missing the boat. At least 15 to 20 minutes before iftar, before the adhan goes, the iftar should be ready, and a person should be on their musalla, or they should be in the masjid involved in dua. This is the most remarkable time to make dua. And not just up to the time of adhan, even after one has broken one's fast. One breaks one's fast, but one pays attention that the adhan is going. One also needs to reply to the adhan. One also needs to read the dua after the adhan. Sometimes in Ramadan, people, they forget that you have to reply to the adhan. They forget that there's a dua after the adhan. And if you want to see someone, it's good to notice. When you're in the masjid or at the time of iftar, today just sit around. If your family is all together, obviously it will be different. But just sit at the time of iftar and just watch people when the adhan goes. Watch how they eat, right? There was the sheikh we were studying with in Hudaydah, and it was amazing. When Ramadan time comes, adhan goes, he takes a date, he takes a bite of the date, takes a sip of water, and then he goes to the masjid. Right? That's it. Now what do we have? Sometimes we have a whole meal. And a person needs to break their fast, obviously, with what is sunnah is dates and water. It is also sunnah to, with the dates, if someone wants to have some cucumber or type of watermelon or any type of something to cool the hotness of the date, that can be there as well. And a person knows what gives them energy, etc. If someone wants to drink an energy drink, there's no problem. Everything comes back to the intention. But pay attention to your nafs. Is your nafs getting the better of you while you're eating? Or are you in control of your nafs while you're eating? And if a person can do this, like we said today at iftar, just pay attention to those around you, pay attention to yourself, and let's make an intention that we will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the ibadah of restraint today. All right, so if you eat 3 samosas at the time of iftar, how many are we going to eat today? Who will be able to go without samosas today? We've got one hand up already. Just try to see how your nafs then accepts or rejects this mujahada, and see that Maghrib Salah, where your mind is. And if you're able to push to Taraweeh, then you'll see where your mind is in Taraweeh. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asr innal insana lafi khusr إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. وإلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم الفاتحة. مالك يوم الدين.